Hi, Gary Stearman coming to you from the studios of Prophecy Watchers. And as this is made, it's mid-June of 2019. And there are burning oil tankers in the Straits of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and those tankers were lit aflame by Iranian troops. In studio with me today is Avi Lipkin. You know Avi, he's been here so many times, and he's going to talk about this and other events that are shaping the world right now. Avi, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Good to be home when I'm not home.
Indeed. Burning oil tankers, and the Iranians are just thumbing their nose basically at the forces of the West.
I think that the Iranians are calling President Trump's bluff. President Trump has been sanctioning Iran. The Iranian economy has been hurting for a very, very long time. I believe at some stage soon we shall see regime change in Iran. Also, I think that President Trump, without getting into American politics, if he succeeds in overthrowing that regime in Iran and bringing democracy to the people of Iran, this will be one of the greatest achievements of any president in American history. And of course, that will reflect well for the 2020 elections. I think the Iranians are being pushed into a corner, and you know, any animal that feels cornered comes out fighting. I think the Iranians are not happy because their economy is increasingly going downhill. And the Iranian people are increasingly suffering and hungry. And at some stage, there will be an internal explosion in Iran. So I think Iran is trying to show its muscle against the Americans, against the Europeans. Europeans are not happy either, because these oil ships, these oil tankers, are going to Europe. They're going to Japan, they're going to all these different countries.
Right.
And the people who, I hate to say this, but the people who control the world are not the Christians or the Jews. People who control the world are the globalists. And the globalists want one thing and one thing only, and that's stable oil prices and stable oil supplies. And this is what the Iranians are attacking. And I think that the Iranian leadership is going to pay dearly for this mistake.
So you're talking about international banking.
Right.
And of course, our Bible speaks volumes about so-called merchants of Tarshish, which is the Bible's way of talking about global merchandising, whether it's oil or cars or whatever you're talking about. And it talks about, just a prophetic word here, in the latter days, the merchants of Tarshish shall suffer a great fall, a great collapse when an international conflagration breaks out at some point in the future. And you're saying that right now there are people fighting for stability, there are people fighting for control, and yet the pesky troops in the Middle East, various factions are running around acting like they own the world. And by the way, you've been writing about this now for decades.
Right.
And I think you've got a good handle on it. Brief us on that a bit.
Well, how long have we been doing shows together? Since 1995?
Yes.
That's 25 years. And I think in my very first show, I spoke about the Dallas Council on World Affairs. And I was there as an Israeli army spokesman. And they said to me, you go back to Shamir, and Prime Minister Shamir at that time, and you tell him we're not going to let the Jews get in the way of our oil supplies, because what made America great is the barrel of oil. And of course, my Christian guest that evening got up very angry and said to these people in the room, who were globalists, you should be ashamed of yourselves. What made America great is not the barrel of oil. What made America great is Jesus Christ. And so that was a very important lesson for me, because America is divided into two. You have Christians and you have globalists who are anti-Christians. But what I'm saying today, 25 years later, is that Israel has very, very successfully developed economically, and Israel marches in lockstep with the United States. Even under President Obama, the militaries of Israel and America marched in lockstep. And so the people today who are threatening the world oil supply are the Shiite regime of Iran. And the way to do that is to block the Straits of Hormuz, which would jack the prices up from $50 or $60 a barrel to $200, $300 a barrel. Okay, so today the threat, if they were saying to me 25 years ago, we won't let Israel get in the way of our oil supplies, or the Jews get in the way of our oil supplies, I think the globalists today are saying eventually they're going to come to the conclusion, we're not going to let the Muslims get in the way of our oil supplies. Now, the Sunni Muslims, like Saudi Arabia, are allies of the U.S., They're participating in the world economy. The Shiites are not, and the Shiites want to harm everyone. In other words, like Samson, bring the whole house down.
Yeah.
And so I think that for the sake of the world economy, it might be indeed that we will see a confrontation, a military confrontation with Iran.
Now, Christians have been reading Ezekiel 38 for years, where it talks about what we would call Iran today, Persia,
Right.
coming against Israel in the latter days. And of course, they've been talking. We've been talking and speculating for years and years and years about this, and we watch with bated breath as these things develop, particularly when the death to America chants come from old Persia, now known as Iran. And we just say, what are they doing? What's their idea here? And I think a lot of us are not really sure what's in their minds. But I think you've got a pretty good handle on it.
Well, we shouldn't forget the economic crisis of 2008, in which oil prices reached $150 a barrel. And that was when George W. Bush was actually finishing his 8-year term. And things crashed down to $30 a barrel. Now, you know that it costs about $20 to create a barrel of oil. So $30 still is not bankruptcy, but now the price of oil is $60 a barrel. But if the Iranians block the Straits of Hormuz, the prices will go back up to $150 to under $300 a barrel. And that, within 2 weeks, means the end of the world economy. And this cannot be tolerated.
And so you're saying now that there will be people taking action.
I believe so.
This is fascinating to me because looking at this, we are kind of torn between two positions. And we'd like to see this all cleared up and Donald Trump say a few words to the leaders of Iran and the whole thing cool down. But from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
What I wanted to say now goes in a slightly different direction. After World War II, the Europeans, for example, were saying, why are we white Christian Europeans slaughtering each other? Because you look at the last 2,000 years, and everybody was killing everyone. The Greeks and the Romans were killing each other, and then the Greeks and the French, and the Germans and the French, and the Spanish and the French, and the English and the French, and the Russians against the Germans, the Russians. So, and of course, the worst part was World War II. So after World War II, in which 70 million people died, the globalists said, well, you know what, we're going to make sure, the golden rule, no more war on European soil. So the Europeans are totally against any kind of war. The only thing that matters to them is the stability of the world economy. No more war. In addition to that, I know, I think you also know, that there are tankers, oil tankers, leaving Alaska every day.
Sure.
To supply Japan and China with oil.
Yes.
Now, you'd think China is the enemy, but the fact is that China, Japan, and India, which are not Christian countries, but they are part of the global world economy, which the Iranians see as a Christian economy. So what they want to do is bring the whole house down, the Iranian leadership. If they're going to suffer, then everybody needs to suffer. And I know, for example, that the Russians had a meeting with the Chinese last week, and they're talking about completing the oil pipeline from Russia, oil-rich Russia, down to China. But until that happens, China is totally dependent on oil imports. And actually, the United States is cooperating with China and Japan to provide their oil needs. But if the Straits of Hormuz get blocked, even America's self-sufficiency and Canada's self-sufficiency will not be enough to cushion the blow of the oil prices that are going to skyrocket.
What amazes me about Avi Lipkin, and I've got a stack of 7 books here and a couple of DVDs, and Avi has been writing for years on this very subject. And basically over the years, the topic has remained much the same. Nothing has really changed. The same enemies are fighting the same battles. It's as though there are 2 boxers in a ring and they're dancing around waiting for the first punch. And we've been doing that now for how long?
Since 1995.
Yeah.
And I won't forget, in our very first show, I spoke about planes crashing into the World Trade Center. And I wrote it in my very first book, Is Fanatic Islam a Global Threat? And everybody attacked me. Everybody said, the Muslims are nice people. Why are you saying such bad things about the Muslims? I said, yes, the Muslims are fantastic people, but the terrorists are fantastic Muslims who know how to do these things. And actually, America was brought down, on 9/11 by 19 guys. And of course, they had a background and an organization behind them. But there are over 100,000 illegal immigrants coming in from Mexico. I'm not talking about Canada, because they're coming in from Canada also. Let's say 1% are terrorists. Let's say 99% of these people are good, sincere, hardworking Latino people who are good Christians in their own way, of course. Only 1% are terrorists. What's 1% of 100,000? 1,000.
Yes.
And that's every month. And so if these people are coming in, the OTMs, other than Mexicans, and they're Islamic. And
Are they organized?
Well, yes, I believe they are organized. And, I've been saying this for many, many years. America has been considered for decades as the great Christian Satan. And Islam looks at America as the great Christian Satan. So how do you overcome this problem of great Christian Satan? There are two ways. One is through Islamic immigration, legal or illegal. The other is through terrorism. 9/11 was terrorism. But what we see today is the immigration of Muslims coming into the U.S. legally or illegally. And I believe today there are 30 million Muslims in America. Many people say I'm exaggerating, but I do the simple math. Like I said, if 1% are terrorists, how much is 1% of 30 million? It's 300,000. 19 guys brought down the World Trade Center. And these people are coming across the border from Mexico. You can see the backpacks, the monitor cameras as people are crossing the border. And only God knows what these people are preparing, sleeper cells here in America.
But they have a plan.
They definitely have a plan. Like I said before, the vast majority of Muslims who live in America want America to be Islamicized through peaceful means, democratic means, but the small minority want just to destroy America.
Let's go back to the Middle East. We've kind of fleshed out this whole, if you will, global plan. But again, I'm very much interested in what's going on. Israel right now is tentative politically. We really don't know who's going to be controlling Israel. The Syrians are armed to the teeth with all kinds of rocketry and aircraft and so forth, and it's death to America in Persia. What are we expecting to see now?
Well, I think I've said this. I said it on our last show a week ago. I was saying that I think that the real enemy of the West is the Sunni Islam, not the Shiite Islam. But the fanatics of Iran have made Shiite Islam, at this point, more dangerous than the Sunni Islam. America and the Europeans are actually doing their business with the Sunni Muslims. In other words, Saudi Arabia and other countries, Qatar and Bahrain, others that produce the oil. But the Shiites are trying to out-crazy the Sunnis. Now, Syria, in my opinion, is a scarecrow. Syria has no justification for existing without Russian backing and Iranian backing. So again, I'm saying, I think at some stage, I think the Russians are going to pull out of Syria. I think at some stage, the Iranians are going to be forced out of Syria. And at that point, the Sunnis come back. ISIS comes back, and they take over Syria. That's when they're going to kill the Christians and the Druze and the Shiite Muslims and the Kurds. And that's when Israel is going to have to come in and save all these people.
Fanatic Islam. Is fanatic Islam a global threat? It's one of your book titles there. And you wrote that when?
This was written at first as a pamphlet in 1995. And in 5 editions, it grew to 300 pages. And none of this is outdated. This is exactly what's happening today. And if you want to know about terrorism today in America, just multiply what I say here by 100 times.
This one, Islamic rivalry, ISIS and Iran fighting for the heart of Islamic identity, is very, very up to date. In other words, it describes a condition that exists right now.
Correct. And also, I wanted to add something very important. The Russians are aligned with Iran for a number of reasons. Primarily, I would say because the Shiite Iranians are enemies of the classic enemy of Russia, which is the Turks.
Yeah.
And so the Americans, who they back? The Turks. And we see here a war of proxies going on for many, many decades. And actually, the United States backed the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and they defeated the Soviets in 1989. And the Soviets pulled out with their tail between their legs. Now what the Russians are trying to do is use the Shiites to harm the Americans and the Westerners, and the Sunni regimes, which are allied with the United States and the West, which are providing the oil.
You know, the Bible has a term for what you're talking about. It's wars and rumors of wars. and characterizing the last days. And that's what we're talking about right now. Somebody, somewhere, sometime, is either going to make a huge misstep or commit a brash, brazen act of some sort, and it's all going to come tumbling down. And I think that's what we're trying to understand right now.
Correct. And I think that President Trump, even though he's being attacked and attacked and attacked by those who oppose him, I think he's very, very well coordinated with the European leadership, because the Europeans also are suffering for a dearth of oil.
You're listening to Avi Lipkin. He's got a pretty good handle on what's going on. He's one of those watchers that we talk about.
I'm watching with everybody.
Avi, with a perspective on global politics from the Israeli point of view, which always interests me. But today we're going to get a glimpse into global politics with Venezuela and what a mess that is.
Indeed, Venezuela has the potential of being one of the most lucrative, rich countries in the world. They have the greatest, I think, among the greatest reserves of petroleum. The area of Maracaibo is like a big lake there, open to the sea, but it's an inland type lake. And it's famous because of fires that just break out of the lake. And that's because of the natural gas seeping out from under the ground. I always remember Venezuela as the strongest economy in Latin America. My family is from Latin America, from Argentina. And I wanted to start first with one point about Argentina, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
In 1992, there was a big explosion which destroyed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina. And I think it was 16 Israelis were killed in the blast. 2 years later, in 1994, the AMIA Jewish Cultural Center was blown up. 85 people were killed. And to make a very long story very short, the explosives were smuggled in from an area called the Triangle of the East, or the Triangle of Terror, on the borders between Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. America has the Niagara Falls in New York and Canada. On those borders, three borders, you have the Iguazu Falls. It's kind of like jungle. You can basically do any kind of business you want, illicit business. And this is 1992, 1994. The Argentine court system has been having a very rough time. Their chief prosecutor was assassinated because he was bringing this to the fore. Argentine leadership was burying this whole guilt or blame for money. And so, when I hear President Trump talking about a border wall, I think it's the most critical threat facing America today, that there's no wall. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, if there are over 100,000 illegal people coming across the border, if only 1% are Iranian terrorists, they have probably 1 million or 2 million terrorists in this country, sleeper cells, just ready to go if a war breaks out with Iran.
Now, let's talk for a moment about caches of explosives that have been reported lately globally. Yes. We're talking about ammonium nitrate bombs, the same sort of a bomb that brought down used in the famous Oklahoma City bombing.
Correct.
And those are all over the world now. Why are they being put in place, and who's doing it?
Yes, well, the Israeli Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, has been warning all the European powers, has been warning the United States of these sleeper cells who are here very quiet, purchasing very quietly ammonium nitrate. And all you do is you mix it with diesel fuel.
Yeah.
Both these things are readily available and legal. You can purchase them and turn them into massive explosions. Think for a moment, if you drive a semi, an 18-wheeler, full of ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel, and drive it up to the base of some skyscraper. That's a way to topple. That's what they tried to do with the World Trade Center in 1993, in February. And so one of the things I'm talking about, and this is in my book from 20 years ago, I'm saying this is something they're going to do. They have never given up their hope to destroy the great Christian Satan, America. Now, one of the things I'm looking at now is indeed, if it is true, and it is true, that the Iranians and the Hezbollah of Lebanon have scattered these ammonium nitrate slicks or caches all over Europe, they've done it in America too. I think that President Trump is looking at a global threat, I call it fanatic Islam, the global threat. It's exactly what it is. If Iran is overthrown, the Iranian crazy regime, Iranians are great people. Our problem is not with the Iranians. Our problem is with the Iranian government. Israel and Iran were allies under the Shah. What we need is a regime change. And once you have a regime change in Iran, you will have a regime change in Venezuela. Now, the communist government in Cuba cannot exist without a communist-type regime in Venezuela, which is bailing it out, because communism is bankrupt. Communism doesn't work. And I'm actually kind of surprised at the Russians, why they're backing these failed systems. I mean, even Russia today, they may have a communist political leadership, but the economy is capitalist. China, the economy is capitalist, even though the party is the Communist Party of China. But these communists are backing regimes which are starving their people. You have rationing now in Cuba again. People are starving in Cuba. People are starving in Venezuela. And I think and I'm going to say something very wild now, if President Trump succeeds in overthrowing the Iranian regime, then it'll be possible to get rid of the Venezuela regime of Maduro and save the people of Venezuela who are starving, save the people of Cuba who are starving. And, but then the counter to that is the Russians will say, oh, okay, we are in your backyard and you are in our backyard. You're in Poland, you're in the Baltic states. Our Russian army is going to retake the 3 Baltic states and Poland. And we're going to, again, the dream of the Russians always is that their borders go back to their great Soviet borders, not the small Russian borders. So and President Trump just sent 1,000 U.S. troops to Poland to reinforce their military. They got now 4,000 U.S. troops in Poland. But if the Russians juggernaut through Poland and the Baltic states, they're going to, but this could all be World War III, which none of us want.
Wow. So that's a lot to swallow at one time.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're talking about a global system of aggression.
Right.
Very, very cleverly orchestrated across several countries. And you know, when we watch the news in America, we don't get that picture at all.
Right.
We don't see the orchestration of large-scale events. We hear about a report in this country, a report in this country. We hear about the Maduro government, but not connected to anything else. And you're sort of drawing lines here that help us to see what's going on.
We have to remember also, World War II did not start with Pearl Harbor. Maybe for the Americans, yes. But World War II started in Europe in September of 1939. World War II started in Ethiopia with the Italian invasion in 1936. World War II started with the Japanese invasion of Korea in 1905. So there are many, many different things which accumulate. And as the world just stands by and watches and nobody does anything, the military dictatorships and military powers in each country feel freer and freer to go ahead and attack. World War I also. You know the story of World War I, that some Serbian fanatic kills the Archduke Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And, well, the Austrians, you know, were attacked by the Serbs, so the Austrians declared war on the Serbs. The Austrians had a pact with the Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany, so Germany attacked, you know, joined the war against the Serbs. So the Russians were allies of the Serbs, and then the British and the French were allies of the Russians. And so this was something, these alliances and détentes were developed over decades. It wasn't something that happened just all of a sudden on the spur of the moment. Yeah. And so I think we're looking at a situation in which things have been building up. I really pray to God that there should not be World War III, but it could be, you know, either America gets attacked and then has to counterattack, or it could be that President Trump might try to overthrow the Iranian regime, even though he says it's not about overthrowing the regime, it's just about stopping their crazy behavior. But when somebody's crazy, you can't just say, we want to stop your crazy behavior. You got to remove them. So we have to see how the Russians respond. We have to see how the Chinese respond. I think that because many people say everything's about money and economics, I think it's one of the reasons why President Trump is trying to finish a deal with China. Listen, he's a businessman. He doesn't hate the Chinese. He doesn't hate the Russians. He doesn't hate anybody. I think personally he could get along very well with Putin. Putin is a nationalist and a Christian, you know, Russian Orthodox Christian nationalist, and Trump is a Protestant Christian nationalist. I think that under normal circumstances they might be able to work together. But like I said before, you have these global intricacies and alliances.
Now, going back to, as we draw near our close here today, let's go back to the burning oil tankers in the Persian Gulf.
Correct.
How do you link that event with what you've been talking about?
Well, I think that the globalist super organization which controls the world, again, it's not the Christians or the Jews, it's the globalists, the money people. They want to make sure about steady oil prices and steady oil supplies. And what Iran is threatening is to upset the apple cart with all those things. And the world wants stability. So it's going to be interesting to see, will that happen? Now, if the Iranians, or maybe ISIS, if ISIS makes a comeback, they're also going to blow up the oil wells. And I predict that Islam overall will be banned by these globalists at some stage. And they will move in massive amount of troops to secure the oil wells in the Persian Gulf and in other places, and navies to ensure that the Straits of Hormuz stay open. All that can only happen once the Iranian regime is removed.
Fascinating. Avi Lipkin, citizen of Israel, but really a global citizen. You've been everywhere, and you've seen a lot behind the scenes, a lot probably that you can't talk about today. And but it's given you an insight, a way of looking at the background behind all of this disruption. And I really am interested in your point of view for that reason.
Also, I've written 7 books, which you offer, of course, for a gift to your ministry.
Yeah.
And these books have basically the 70 years of my life and my travels and my experiences. And again, these are things that are not taught in American or European schools or Israeli schools. This is not something you're going to get in church or synagogue. It's not on CNN or Fox. So I think people should avail themselves of the information.
And your books are in our online library, prophecywatchers.com, and just click on the online bookstore and you can find all of Avi's books. Avi, thanks for coming by. It's an amazing world. It's a strange world. Biblically speaking, it's a world that I think God is sort of overseeing, and I remember in the Psalms, he who sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. He shall have them in derision. Is the picture of God in the heavens looking down at the earth and saying, these people, they think they're doing something great. And his reaction is, I just have to laugh.
Yeah, well, I think it says in Proverbs, and I think it also says in the New Testament, it says also that many are the thoughts of man, but it is God's will that happens. So we do our best, and God will do the rest.
Indeed. Amen. Avi Lipkin from Israel. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.